Hey everybody. Well, really good news. I just got a call from the Federal Bureau of Investigation, and they're following up on that report that I made to them that I was threatened by somebody through email on November 11th. And so I'm going to be speaking to the FBI about that specific death threat that I received in November. So that's a good thing. I wasn't sure they were going to get back to me or what. So I'm glad that somebody is following up. So anyone that wants to make death threats against me, that's fine. Do it. And I will just report it to the FBI, and then they will do whatever investigation they need to do. And in turn, I will take care of myself. But just want to, give you guys a heads up that actually is going to get followed up by the FBI. Okay, so that's awesome. Now, this is the most amazing discovery I just figured out. The 3 things that kill people, the 3 things. It's the natural killer cells, those antibodies, okay? The Candida and the fungus, and that's what originally started this journey, was the fact that I saw Candida was the common denominator in all of the cancer, disease, and chronic illness. But there was a lot more that we had to uncover and peel back the layers. So that's what the last couple of years has been. It's been peeling back the layers of programming to get to the root, get to the bottom of what is actually going on with our bodies. And then we just since discovered hormone dominance is another issue that destroys the body. So the whole thing with NK cells, how do we figure that out? Well, there's so many different names for natural killer cells, T cells, NK cells, antibodies, that people get really confused and they think they're all different things. But actually, they're the same thing. These are created by your innate immune system because you have 2 different immune systems. You have the adaptive and you have the innate immune system. Your adaptive is what allows you to adapt to whatever conditions, and it creates enough antibodies to protect the body so that way you can survive in those specific conditions. And the innate immune system is able to then regenerate what it can to keep you going. So it's able to fix whatever issues enough, but not all the way to where you're reversing the aging process, but it gives you enough regeneration to keep you doing your daily life. Okay, so those NK cells are being produced from both your immune systems. Now, I've heard that it was from the innate immune system that the NK cells are developed. But now how do we know that why are sugar? Why do we think they're poisonous? What's the evidence to support that natural killer cells or antibodies are poisonous? Well, we figured out what the RH, the RH factor and the blood types, the different blood types. Right now we know of A, B, and O, and then there's new blood types that are being, discovered, right? And what's a blood type? Well, it's surface marker antigen. Well, what is antigen? Antigen is a foreign object, sugar, stop doing that. Sugar, stop it. Sugar, no. Oh, she's destroying her bed. There goes another bed. Anyways, so what? Sugar. Forget it. That bed's destroyed. Whatever. I can't say anything. All right. So what's the NK cells? Why are they poisonous? Because we figured out. Okay. So antigen. So antigen is a foreign object. Okay. When you're exposed to antigen, oh my God, you have natural killer cells that come up and destroy that antigen or antibodies. And then those antibodies that go after, so when you get a disease or you get exposed to a pathogen or antigen, that is then creating these antibodies. So those antibodies are then going after that specific antigen or pathogen or bacteria or whatever, right? And then that is swimming around in your body. So when you do a blood test, you can see the different types of antibodies because you're testing for a specific disease. So the disease is already, the components of the disease is already listed somewhere on a pamphlet or a sheet somewhere, and then when someone tests for it, they can see it has the same characteristics, and that's how they know it's an antibody against this specific disease. Okay, so that's what antigen is. So when you have surface marker antigen, that is creating continuous antibodies. Okay, so it means that you have now all this antigen that's creating antibodies. So when you get a blood transfusion, you're not supposed to get, if you're an AB, okay, so you're an AB positive. So you have A antigen, surface marker antigen, you have B surface marker antigen, and all those antigens are relative to that specific blood type. A has surface marker antigen types of antigen. I don't know what the antigen is. And B also has specific antigens. And then you have the O. O has no surface marker antigen. Then what's the plus and minus? That is the Rh factor, the rhesus monkey gene. So if you're Rh negative, it means you don't have the rhesus monkey gene. If you're Rh positive, you do, which means that the antibodies are being created because you have that specific virus in your body. Okay? So if you go get a transfusion and you're O negative, you have to get only blood from an O negative donor. And in very specific circumstances, in very rare circumstances, would you get an O positive donor. But you could not get blood, you cannot receive blood from an A or B positive person. You know why? Because all of those antigens in the AB positive would then create so much antibodies in that person who's O negative that it would destroy them. It would thicken up their blood and then shut the body down. And that's in the worst case scenario of having too much antibodies in the body, natural killer cells. Okay, so there's the extreme side of it. And now you're looking at on the spectrum of the human or of the matrix of where humans, when they're born all the way to they're dead in the matrix, how much natural killer cells are you accumulating over a course of your lifetime? And it all depends on your belief systems, on your lifestyle, on your behaviors, okay? And so you're seeing now these autoimmune disorders, you're seeing the vaccine schedules being cranked up, you're seeing all these different immunotherapies that are being created. And so we're having more and more natural killer cells or antibodies being created over a course of a lifetime. And then also too, with that said, then we have the Candida and the fungus, which is yeast overfed. You need yeast to clean up your system from sugars and sugar substitutes and heavy metals, but our lifestyle has been feeding the yeast to where it becomes out of control, no different than too much fungus on a tree in the shade. What is the fungus's balancing force out there in nature on a tree? It's the sun. But you have continuous shade, then all that fungus is going to then multiply. No different than when you have yeast in your body, which is okay, but then you keep eating all this crap and there's no countering force, then that yeast gets overfed and it becomes out of control. And then you have the protein docking, and I've talked about that before. But then there's the hormone dominance. So the hormones, so estrogen actually keeps the natural killer cells at bay. So that's why our government and academia and the medical industry are using hormones and playing with immunotherapies and creating antibodies and natural killer cells. And they're trying to help stabilize people when they start getting symptoms. But if you have too much of one hormone, guess what? You're totally imbalanced. So the natural killer cells, the Candida, and the hormones all have to be in balance and work symbiotically together. You have something that is like a malfunction in the communication, and now you have more natural killer cells being created, and the hormones not work correctly, so it's not offsetting that. Guess what? The person dies. No different than when you have too many hormones that are dominant, and then the person's making wrong decisions, and then they're exposing themselves to very stressful situations, and it's creating more natural killer cells. Okay, you'd think that someone that's estrogen dominant wouldn't have as many natural killer cells, but it still throws the body off balance and then the Candida becomes, and so it's hard to say what happened first, but all three of those that are malfunctioning in some way is the cause of death, the aging process, and cancer, disease, and chronic illness. How it's like the chicken or the egg, what came first? Was it the NK cells that were created first? Or was it hormone dominance? Or was it the Candida? Those all are supposed to be actually working for you, but if they become imbalanced, then it becomes detrimental. So with the whole thing with the vaccines, okay, you're trying to get out of vaccines, somebody that has cancer, disease, and chronic illness, go get a titer test. And this is where the whole titer test that I'm talking about, as far as listing out all of the antibodies that are in your body and what they're attached to, you can see if you have an antibody against this specific vaccine that they're recommending. And some lady said that she did get a titer test for her baby, so the baby didn't have to get the MMR shot that they were trying to force her to get. So, which means that if somebody does have cancer, disease, and chronic illness, they can go and measure to see how many natural killer cells their body is made up of. And then a friend of theirs that is relatively healthy can go get a titer test to see how many natural killer cells that are in their body. And then they compare the two. And it would be an apples to apples comparison because you're both human. So if this person has all this cancer, disease, and chronic illness, and they get a titer test and they see they have all these NK cells and all these antibodies, you can now make a direct correlation that mutations and cancer, disease, and chronic illness and antibodies, natural killer cells, are the reason why people are dying, which then gives us another argument against the vaccine industry that is trying to create more antibodies. They're trying to cut your life down, but they're saying antibodies are good. So they're saying, oh yeah, it's all about the pathogens that are in the vaccines. They're all focusing on the ingredients. But those ingredients are no different than what you eat and what you drink and what you breathe in every single day. Okay, so you're exposed to mercury. When you're eating a high fructose corn syrup, that's mercury, no different than what's in the vaccine. If anything, what you eat every day is way more than what you get in one vaccine. So it's not about the ingredients of which the anti-vax community is focusing on. They're focusing on aborted fetus cells, and they're focusing on all the different adjuvants, the additives, the eggs and all this other stuff, right? Which, yes, does contribute to the allergies. But what the real crux, the dangers of which nobody is even talking about in the anti-vax world, is the amount of antibodies that is being created from adding, those ingredients into the person's body. Okay? So it's not like they're giving you nutrition. It's not like you're getting nutrition. You are getting pathogens, but it's not the pathogens that are necessarily hurting you. It's the amount of antibodies, because you're already getting those negative pathogens anyways in your environment. But it's the amount of antibodies and how those, and then people are shedding, okay, even though, they say it's not a very strong virus, but it creates antibodies, but you're still shedding, so you are contagious. And so somebody in your environment is going to then be exposed potentially. And now this is where I'm saying, like, if you've never received a vaccine in your life ever, if you've never ever received a vaccine in your life, and you get a titer test and you have no antibodies for, like, say, the measles, and you've been exposed to a population that has, that obviously has the measles, then that would take the whole, argument out of the vaccine industry. But I don't know who would, I don't know anybody that has not been exposed in Western society, at least in America, that has not been exposed to the measles, has not received a vaccine or been exposed. Because even the people that, that are anti-vax and they believe in exposing their kids to the measles in their natural environment, and they get the measles naturally, not through the vaccine, that still creates antibodies. You're still destroying your child. Why would you expose your kid to a disease? That doesn't make sense. That's why I'm saying the anti-vax and the pro-vax are actually working together, because they both are creating antibodies regardless. So, those are the three things. So we, in the book that Kevin and I are going to be writing, I'm going to have a little bit of a blurb on this, on the NK cells and the antibodies, T cells, the Candida and the fungus, the cancer, and the hormones, because the hormones and the NK cells balance each other out. But that's all relative to the right nutrition, the right elements your body receives, so it's able to balance it out on its own. You can't figure out dosages. You can't determine how much antibodies, how much Candida or how much yeast, and how much hormones should be distributed on any given day or any given minute. You can't do that. But obviously you're imbalanced, because look at you, you're aging and you have cancer, disease, and chronic illness. So obviously there's an imbalance somewhere. Where it started out, it doesn't matter. You have an imbalance. So this is where the Jilly Juice comes in, because it's strategic nutrition that will then finally able to put your body back into balance, so you can have your hormones work for you to your advantage, to your benefit. You can have the yeast work to your benefit, and you can have the antibodies work to your benefit. Right now, all those three things are not working to your benefit if you have cancer, disease, and chronic illness, and you're aging, obese, and completely emotional activist. You have an imbalance between one of those three things, or all three of those things. Actually, anybody that has cancer, disease, and chronic illness has an imbalance in all three of those things. So that's what I'm saying. Go, if you are relatively well, go get your blood type, okay? Go get a titer test. And then when you start seeing yourself degrade and you're getting all these different vaccines, go then take another titer test and see the difference. Check your blood type again. Or those of you that are really, really sick and you're doing Jilly Juice, do a titer test today, okay? And then see how many antibodies you have relative, to when, let's say down the road when you're on Jilly Juice. Check your blood type a year down the road while you're on Jilly Juice. Start taking the data, because the data is going to be your friend. That way you're not playing and working from hearsay, because the activism community is so big on hearsay and they're so big on making claims, they completely discredit themselves. They're passing along all these holistic articles about all the pathogens that are in the vaccines, but nobody is focusing on the amount of antibodies, those vaccines, plus the practices, the cannabis, the detoxes, the pills, powder, supplements, the prescription drugs, your environment, all of that creates antibodies. So does 5G. But hey, hold on a second, don't worry about it. Because now you have Jilly Juice that is able to offset that. But if your focus is to stop people from taking vaccines, then you must have a substantiation of why the vaccines are bad. And it's not because they're deadly, because you can have a kid could take a vaccine and they don't die. They might have a reaction, but they don't die. So then what's the thing? They get maimed. And then you can do a titer test to see what antibodies are most prevalent. And then you can see that is a direct correlation. So then correlation does equal causation. Okay, correlation would equal causation. If you did a titer test prior and your kid got a vaccine, and then you saw they had a difference in their appearance and their behaviors, and then they get another titer test to see exactly what was present, and then now the numbers don't lie, because you're going to go to a neutral party that has no idea your intention of the test. Okay, so utilize those labs, and utilize the data that's available to you, the 23andMe. So even though you're all like, oh my God, 23andMe, it's selling your data, your DNA. Well, it's already, your DNA has already been exposed, so don't even worry about that. Now use that to your advantage. And again, the 23andMe only gives you 10, they only test for 10 types of antibodies. That's it. But there's so many other, you see how many vaccines there are. There's way more than 10. So there's probably, you probably have a lot more. If you have all 10, then you have a lot more than 10. But then you go to a separate lab and go get, an immunoglobulin test and see what exactly, everything that's listed out that's relative to your blood. And then you will then see that, the difference as you're on Jilly Juice. You're going to see your NK cells recede back, because when I got the sulfa to deal with a bladder infection, I had to go to the hospital because I had too many white blood cells. I had too many NK cells, and I had a rash and inflammation all over my body. I had to go get stabilized in the hospital because I had too many NK cells, that it was dangerous. So they had, I don't know what they did to me. I don't know what was going on. I mean, I just knew that I was in the hospital, so I lay on my bed, and, you know, a nurse, which is one of my friends at the time, and she's since passed away from breast cancer. But she was just saying, oh, you had a scare. You had, and it was at Kaiser. So, you know, and I'm allergic to sulfa. Go figure. Okay, so that's how I knew that white blood cells weren't good. And then we're looking at the Rh factors and the blood types, and you can't mix the blood types. And then we're realizing the antibodies are really not good for us, but yet we're inducing antibodies all the time through the vaccine industry, as well as through the holistic supplements market and the allopathic prescription drugs market. But what they're doing in the prescription drugs market is they're taking hormones and they're doing stuff to induce NK cells, and they're playing that balancing game, because some hormones, you know, like estrogen, does balance out and keep the NK cells at bay. So, you know, this is what biotech is doing. They're playing with your biochemistry. So now you have a leg up. You actually have the advantage, because now you know this. You know, they don't know the context of why you want these reports, but go get it. Arm yourself with the data, so then you can have leverage. And everything has been substantiated by academia, because you can't mix blood types and antibodies. There are diseases when you have too many antibodies in your blood, Waldstrom's disease and lymphoma. Okay? So you already have the substantiation of why your kids should not be receiving a vaccine. Because they probably already have the antibody, because you already received the vaccine, I'm sure, in your lifetime at some point, or you were exposed to the disease at some point. So you already have the antibody. And then when you bear children, you pass that mutation, those antibodies, on to your offspring. So there's no reason why your kid should get a vaccine if they already have the antibodies. Titer tests are the key. Get a titer test if you truly want to fight this battle. Because if you're just passing along articles and that's it, and you're bitching about the pathogens and the aborted fetus cells and all that, then you're really political. You have no interest really to be effective in your arguments, to get the point across. You're still on that political platform playing the emotional poor me game, instead of actually being effective in understanding how the human body works and what is actually dangerous. Because the CDC talks about, their whole focus is the antibodies. Their focus isn't on the actual pathogen, because the pathogen is actually a weak pathogen. They want to induce antibodies. Antibodies are dangerous. How do you know they're dangerous? You don't mix blood types. Bam, straightforward. Nothing else needs to be said. No distraction on the mercury, the eggs, or the eggs in, you know, in the vaccines, or the aborted fetus cells. That's all freaking distraction. It's about the antibodies, and they make a point to highlight that in the CDC website when it comes to how do vaccines work. Okay? So this should give you a lot more info so you can be effective in fighting for your family, for your kids. Now, I hope that you guys take this to heart, and I hope you do something with this. Because how else are you going to reach your friends and family who don't know any better? You've got to educate. You really have to educate. And Krista goes, sweet, I should do this, as I did a test that showed high IgE when I was really sick. Would be great to see the difference now. Yeah. Yeah, when I was in the hospital because I was allergic to sulfa, I had high antibodies, high white blood cells. It all makes perfect sense. Okay? So it's incumbent upon you guys to understand the role of antibodies, and too many is bad. The role of Candida and fungus, too much is bad. The role of hormones, and too much is bad. It's about balance, guys. But you can't be the one to figure out that balance. Your body does in the right conditions with the right strategic nutrition. You can't dose yourself with hormones or Candida or, T cells. You can't do that. But people try. And then all these things on the market that they're selling to you is the real true snake oil salesman. Cabbage, water, and salt is the most simplest thing, and it's fermented. So you're using the right bacteria. That's why this protocol is so amazing, because it has you cut through the bullshit. You realize I would not have figured this out 2 years ago? You know how long it took me to get to this point? You guys have seen it, so you know there's something to what I'm saying. Okay? All right. Talk to you guys later. Bye.